The Advanced Camera Tools system is a whole new way of rendering in LightWave 3D. Renders are no longer limited to the standard perspective camera. Instead, you can now model any type of camera lens you wish. This gives you full control over what part of the scene is rendered for any part of the image and can create some very unique results. Let's start by using the classic camera. I'm going to choose Properties and I'm going to leave it on Classic Camera. Let's go ahead and move this over here. Do a test render with F9. And close this window. Here is the result with the classic camera. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that preview window, and what I want to do is I want to turn this object into my lens. So I'm going to change the classic camera to the advanced camera, and we get these options. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the ray start. Instead of item position, I'm going to change it to UV position on mesh. I'm going to choose the mesh, so under item I'm going to choose my lens object, and I'm going to choose a UV map on there, which is texture 2. I got real creative with the naming convention there. And for ray direction, I'm going to change it to mesh UV smooth normal and pick the same mesh and the same UV map. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that down, and I'll go ahead and close this window. And let's pop over our preview window again. Let's do another test render with F9. And I'm going to close this. As you can see, the result gives us some distortion based off the distortion of the mesh here. We've got these curved edges, so it starts curving out on these edges. The gradient background really helps show what's happening to our image that's being rendered with this lens. Because our lens is an actual object, we can deform the lens using various methods. Let's go ahead and take a look at one way of deforming it. I'm going to select this object, go to Properties, Deform, and I've got Morph Mixer. I've got a morph on this object that I've set a few keyframes. As I scrub through, you can see the values on my morph changing, and you can see the mesh deforming. This is going to affect our final render. I'm going to go ahead and close this window down. Let's take a look at what the final rendered output looks like from this scene. I'm going to drag over our little animation here and push play, and nothing is moving in the scene as you saw when we scrubbed the timeline. Everything that's happening here in this rendered animation is based off the deformations of the lens itself, which can give a very, very strange but unique look to the final output. In this example, I've got a teapot, I've still got the gradient background that we used earlier, and then my lens, this is the same lens, but I've added a bone chain here, and I've animated those bones. So I'm deforming my lens using the bones to deform it. Okay, and so let's take a look at what this animation will look like. Again, nothing is moving in the scene except the lens itself, which is causing the distortions in the render. And again, this is slightly different from what we were seeing when we were using a morph with a twist. Of course, if we morphed the lens in the same shape as what the bones are doing, we could get a similar effect. But this is just showing that bones can affect our lens as well using an object as our lens. In this example, I'm using the same lens that I created in Modeler. I'm using the same gradient backdrop and I'm using the same character, except this time I'm using this null in the scene as an effector on my lens, so I'm distorting my lens with the displacement using the effector tool. Okay, let's take a look at what the final rendered output is for this, and here we go. Same distorted lens as before, except this time the effector's passing through the lens object and it's causing the distortions in the final render. In this example, my camera lens is facing both in the positive Z and the negative Z, and I've also applied a ripple displacement map, so that's how we're getting these little ripples running through our mesh. Okay, and I'm sizing up the character over time just to change the effect of what the render is going to look like. So with this as our camera lens, this is the result that we get. So we've got our positive Z and our negative Z both in the same render, and of course the ripples going on in our render are from the ripple displacement map to our lens. So we get this really trippy looking rendered output here. In this example, I've got several objects loaded in my scene. I'm going to use the blue box here as my camera lens, and I've got a UV map with all 6 sides of this box on the UV map. So when I do my test render, I get to see from all views, from all angles of that box, I get to see my scene. So all in one render. This would be great for creating environment maps and for getting multiple views in one render. In this example, I've got this camera lens here, this camera lens object, and I've applied dynamics to it. So gravity affects it, it starts pulling it down, and as I move it, it starts whipping around my lens. Okay. Also in my scene, I've got a couple boxes, I've got a teapot and the gradient background, and let's see what our result looks like in the final render. So as nothing's moving in the scene except the box was rotating a little bit, but as the camera lens is affected by the dynamics and it's moved around, it starts affecting what is being rendered based off of the UV map on this object. There really are no limits to what kind of lens you can have with the advanced camera tools. The lens shader will allow you to create outlandish, impossibly warped and twisted views for that unique look when normal just won't do.